Hey, Savannah, good morning to you. I'm here in Detroit, the headquarters of General Motors, to sit down and talk to the CEO of this company, Mary Barra. We'll talk about with her in just a moment. We're here a day after this company sent notifications to its dealers in North America to stop selling and delivering 2013 and 2014 Chevy Cruze sedans because of a possible problem with the airbags in those cars. It's just the latest in a very long list of recalls this company has been through over the past 6 months. We'll talk to Mary Barra in a second, but first, here's NBC's Kevin Tibbles.
General Motors is in Mary Barra's blood. She got her start more than 30 years ago working the assembly line. Just 6 months ago, the mother of two became the first female CEO in the auto giant's history. She was immediately thrust into the hot seat, handling a series of massive high-profile recalls on millions of vehicles for defects going back more than a decade. The airbag problems that have put a halt to the sale of the new Chevy Cruze are just the latest. Barra addressed her employees earlier this month.
We failed these customers, and we must face up to it, and we must learn from it.
An internal investigation cleared Barra and other senior managers of covering up problems that are being blamed for more than a dozen deaths.
General Motors has a culture of secrecy and of avoiding responsibility. And Mary Barra apparently did not know about this terrible safety defect, but she should have known.
The bottom line clearly shows Mary Barra, as CEO, has the pedal to the metal. GM sales in May skyrocketed 13%. Is this all positive news for Mary Barra?
She's in a situation where she has to keep the company running and on solid ground, but at the same time deal with this is a crisis.
This new CEO's real challenge, some say, is ensuring GM not only sells cars, but changes its culture from within. For today, Kevin Tibbles, NBC News, Chicago.
And Mary Barra joins us now exclusively. Ms. Barra, nice to see you. Good morning.
Good to see you.
Are you done with recalls? I mean, this has been a long line of recalls, 20 million cars in the last year or so. Are you done?
We're going to continue to look at the data that we get, and we're going to take the action that we need. That's our commitment to customers. If we find an issue, we're going to deal with it.
So it's possible we could be hearing more recalls down the road?
It's possible.
Since this story broke 6 months or so ago, you have answered very difficult questions. You've gone before Congress. You've seen the headlines. You fired 15 people. They don't work here anymore because of their involvement in that situation. Have you fired everyone you're going to fire in connection with this situation?
Yes, I believe we had. You know, the investigation that was done independently was exhaustive. It went to all areas, and you know, there were people in 5 different functions across all levels of the company. And I do believe, associated with this situation, we've addressed the issue.
I think a lot of people wonder, does this go beyond bad communication, mismanagement, bad decision-making within the company? Was something criminal going on inside General Motors? You say you've looked at this exhaustively. Do you think anyone acted in a criminal way in dealing with these ignition switches?
You know, clearly this issue took too long to find it, and in this case we failed our customers. We failed them with these vehicles. Again, you know, the criminal aspect of it, I think that's for the courts to decide. I can tell you I've taken action, and the people that I don't think should be a part of the company aren't.
Would you be surprised if criminal charges were filed against anyone who worked for General Motors while this was all going on?
Again, that I think is for the courts to decide. I don't think it's right for me to speculate on that, but you know, clearly there were mistakes made, and we're dealing with the situation.
Was there a cover-up? Clearly a lot of people within this company knew at separate times, it seems, and in different locations, that there was a problem with these ignition switches. And still, as you just mentioned, the company was extremely slow to deal with it. Is that because there was a cover-up?
I don't really think there was a cover-up. I think what we had, and it was covered in the report, there were silos of information, so people had bits and pieces and then didn't come forward with information or didn't act with a sense of urgency, and it's simply unacceptable.
Did money play a role, Ms. Barra? The company was trying to dig its way out of bankruptcy. Cost-cutting was essential. Did someone say, hey, it's expensive to recall and fix all those cars? I think $1.7 billion has been set aside. Let's see if we can avoid recalling those cars.
Absolutely not. During that same period of time and leading up to when we went through the bankruptcy and restructuring, there were many recalls made. So those decisions were being made. The problem with this is people didn't understand the safety aspects of it. And that too, we've made substantial changes so that will never happen again.
You had to sit down and talk to family members of people who died in crashes related to those faulty ignition switches. As a new CEO, as a mom, what was that like?
It was incredibly difficult to know that mistakes were made that caused people to lose loved ones or to have serious physical injury. If I could turn back the clock, I would, but I can't. So what I want to do is make sure we create the right systems and processes and have the right people that this never happens again, because it was unacceptable. I
don't want to make this about you, but at any time during those meetings with those loved ones, did you stop and think, why did I get this job?
You know, through tough periods of time, and General Motors has had tough periods in the past, I know the men and women of General Motors, the vast majority, come to work every day. They do their best, and so as difficult as it is, I'm more committed than ever to make sure we make this company what I know it can be.
You said something recently that I don't think a lot of CEOs would say. You said you don't want to put this episode behind you at this company. You want it to forever be a part of the collective memory here at General Motors. And I'm going to ask you to explain why when you join us in our next half hour to continue this conversation. Thanks very much. Let's go back to Savannah. Back on a Thursday morning here in Detroit, Michigan, Mary Barra has been called the most powerful woman in the history of the auto industry. She became CEO of General Motors back in January, and since that time, she's had to deal with a spate of problems, massive recalls, and a scathing internal report over how this company handled safety concerns. Ms. Barra has agreed to an exclusive live interview this morning, and she's sticking around. Mary, it's nice to see you. Thank you for staying around.
Sure.
13 deaths so far have been attributed to ignition switch problems with the Chevy Cobalt. Will that number rise?
Again, I think people have misunderstood. The 13 was when we first looked into this issue and looked at things that could be related to this defect. The compensation program that we're doing, we want every single person who either lost a loved one or had a serious physical injury to be a part of that program, because we want to do the right thing.
You've said you don't want to put this episode in the company's history behind you. In fact, you said, I never want to put this behind us. I want to keep this painful experience in our collective memories. When we continue this conversation, I need to know how you plan to do that.
Well, we need to make sure we don't forget, because that's the only surefire way to make sure we never repeat it again, and that's what's most important. You know, we want to be a company that our customers trust. When they get behind the wheel, when they get into one of our products, we can't forget what happened.
Can they trust this company right now based on the recall of these 20 million cars?
They absolutely can, because we're doing the right thing. We're being guided by our values, and that's to do the right thing for the customer. We make every decision by putting the customer in the center. When we got into this situation, my very first question is, are these cars safe to drive? And I asked our chief engineer, would you put your family in the vehicle?
This internal report, I mentioned, was scathing. It talked a lot about the culture at General Motors that has existed for decades. One of the things that shocked me is employees would sit in on critical safety meetings and they wouldn't take notes because they thought the lawyers did not want them to take notes. In other words, there'd be no paper trail of what was said during those critical safety meetings. Were you aware of that culture? You've been here 30 years.
I wasn't aware in these safety meetings they weren't taking notes. What I can tell you right now, they're detailed, and I can tell you I'm copied and I'm reviewing all the material personally.
So how do you change that culture? You have to do it by more than firing people and instilling the fear of God in them. How do you go about communicating to the people who've been part of the history of this company for years that things must change?
Well, I think it's by the way we act. It's the ownership we're taking. It's doing the right thing for the customer. All of those things are communicating to employees that we want them to do the right thing, and they're stepping up. Matt, when I talked to all of our employees when I was covering the Valukas report, I could see their faces. They accepted it. They internalized. I've gotten hundreds of emails. They get it.
I want to tread lightly here, but you've heard this. You heard it in Congress and you've heard it in the headlines. You got this job because you are hugely qualified. 30 years in this company, a variety of different jobs. But there are some people who are speculating that you also got this job as a woman and as a mom, because people within General Motors knew this company was in for a very tough time. And as a woman and a mom, you could prevent a softer face and softer image for this company as it goes through this horrible episode. Does it make sense, or does it make you bristle?
Well, it's absolutely not true. I believe I was selected for this job based on my qualifications, but we dealt with this issue. When the senior leadership of the company knew about this issue, we dealt with it the minute we knew.
You're a mom, I mentioned, 2 kids. You said in an interview not long ago that your kids said they're going to hold you accountable for one job, and that is being a mom.
Correct.
Given the pressures of this job at General Motors, can you do both well?
I think I can. I have a great team. We're on the right path. We're doing the right things. We're taking accountability, and also I have a wonderful family, a supportive husband, and I'm pretty proud of my kids, the way they're supporting me in this.
Well, I know it's a difficult time for you and a very busy time, and I really appreciate you taking the time with us here in Detroit this morning. Mary Barra, thank you very much.
Thank you, Matt.
All right.